Reprise le débat. L'honorable député.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am very pleased to speak to today's debate. And as a nurse, when we talk about health problems, any bill that concerning health problems, for me it is always an excellent opportunity to speak in the House to the topic. What we need to understand is that autism is a disorder that is frequent, widespread. It is very intense, not only for the person who has it, but for the family and everyone in that person's entourage. And unfortunately, it is incurable. It affects millions of Canadian families, especially children. It perturbs the functioning of the brain, and it impedes an ability to have normal communications or social interaction, and also very repetitive and structured behaviors. These symptoms vary in intensity for each individual, and that can vary over time. When I talk about varying over time, I mean that there can be a small improvement in the symptoms depending on the behavioral therapy that is provided to the young person. There may be a certain improvement, but obviously these symptoms will remain. 1 out of 100 children are affected. This is an evaluation. Therefore, it is the most widespread neurological disorder, even more than AIDS, diabetes, and pediatric cancer combined. There are some 48,000 children and 144,000 adults who have autism. So if we take into account families, relatives, friends, the entourage, it is a very high number of Canadians who have to live with the consequences of this disorder on a daily basis. The causes are unknown, and we can see certain things with different factors and statistics, but the cause is unknown for now. There is research being done into genetic, biological, and environmental factors, but right now we cannot determine with any certainty what the cause is and whether there is a way of curing or preventing this disease. So it is a very major reality in terms of Canada Health, and it should be a major national concern. When we talk about these symptoms, that is the absence of socialization, the lack of communication. There is usually a delay in language development, which is more or less severe according to the intensity of the symptoms. An autistic child will not be like other children. He will not understand other children. He will not understand their behavior, their games, their interests, and so it is very difficult for these children to interact with other children because he does not understand them. It must also be understood that these symptoms, with regard to the symptoms, these children may have very violent crises, very incomprehensible reactions. Well, incomprehensible for everyone but the child in question. So that makes a family and social life very difficult. I'd like to give you a concrete example, Mr. Speaker. When the child has a crisis or a tantrum at age 3, well, the parents can manage it. But what if it is a 16-year-old young man who weighs 250 pounds? Well, it's much more difficult to experience, and it can even cause injuries to the parents when they are trying to subdue the child. So it has a major impact on families. And I wanted to give that concrete example because I believe that it is important to understand the reality with which these parents must live. Another important point is that most children who do not have autism, so-called normal children, they do not understand autistic children. They do not understand their reactions. They do not understand why their little neighbor, their friend, acts in this way. So it is very difficult for them. So they do not tend to reach out to autistic children. So once again, it is difficult for these children to interact with other people. I talked about the consequences that are very difficult to manage for families. We know that these children require a great deal of attention, and so families tend to turn inwards on themselves. Communication with the outside world is almost non-existent because everything must be very structured. The children need constant care. It's very difficult to manage, so the parents tend to stay within their own little bubble. They don't have time to reach out to their friends. They don't have time to think of anything else but the children, and their life is focused on this disorder. When the diagnosis comes, the family situation is changed forever. When for example, the pediatrist or the psychologist who evaluates the child tells the parents that this child is autistic, well, they know that they will have to look after the child for the rest of his or her life, because these children, even once they are adults, they still need care. They still need assistance. So a member of the family will have to provide care to that person for the rest of their lives, and so that is very, very difficult for these families. Here's another concrete example. For example, if your child starts to scream and hit other people, for example, in a grocery store, or if he's at someone else's house, well, the parents have to intervene, obviously. And you would think that normally the situation can be resolved. But with an autistic child, it's always very unforeseeable. They don't know when these tantrums will occur, and it can happen anywhere. And everyone around them, no one around them understands what's going on. They don't understand why your child is screaming and shouting. And these are extremely stressful situations. So every time the family needs to go out with the child is very, very difficult, because they do not know exactly what's going to happen or how the child will manage change. Everything needs to be planned down to the last detail. Everything must be planned and structured so that there are no negative consequences for the child. So it's very difficult to plan and structure that, and that is why the parents are so affected by social isolation. And in most cases, or at least very frequently, if both parents work, it is practically impossible to continue that way. At least one of the parents must leave their jobs in order to look after the child, because it is a task that is too demanding, because we know full well that looking after autistic children calls for specific abilities, and often it is very hard to find assistant care, for example, babysitters, because these children are so much more difficult. Therefore, the parents are overworked, they feel isolated, they feel insecure about the future of their children. They don't know if the child will one day be independent, if they will be able to hold down a job, for example. There is discrimination that comes into play. The other children, the other siblings, don't receive the same attention. And so there can be even some parents even attempt to commit suicide. So this is a very major problem. So in this bill, the bill is calling for a World Autism Awareness Day. And I don't think that anyone would vote against this bill, because it's a very good bill. So it must be adopted. But what we need to understand as well is that if we do adopt this World Autism Awareness Day, we must go even further. We must take action to encourage research, to find more care for these people. Awareness and education, all of those are required. So I am calling on people not merely to adopt this bill, but also to walk the talk and put in place concrete actions in order to relieve the burden of these families, who, in my opinion, is very heavy. So I would urge my colleagues to support this bill, but also to take follow-up action that go in the same direction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.